Thank you for joining me on this live stream today on my Facebook Live. I'm streaming today from my personal. Hi, how are you today? We're streaming from my page, and we'll then share it in the Taking Care of Us page, because I think today's subject is something that more people might be interested in. So welcome to our page. This is, I'm Carmen Wimberly Cawthon, and happy to have you here with me today. We are going to start a series of discussions on medical disparities in America. And I want to tell you where this came from. As many of you know, coronavirus, or have heard, coronavirus has been most hard-hitting on people of color, people who already have underlying health issues, and definitely on Africa. And so I had a friend to reach out to me about 3 weeks ago and ask me about on a quote from Dr. Anthony Fauci, who was at the White House at the time in a press conference. And these were some statements that he made. And so a friend asked me about what he said. And when I read it, I thought, I can't do this off the top of my head. There's a lot of history that is part of this discussion, and it needs to be shared. So this came out of the Business Insider. This article was done April 7th, and this is what Dr. Fauci said. And the reason I want to bring it up, because I couldn't help sitting there reflecting on how sometimes when you're in the middle of a crisis, like we are now with the coronavirus, it really does have, ultimately, shine a very bright light on some of the real weaknesses and foibles, that's problems, in our society. As some of you may know, the greater proportion of my professional career has been defined by HIV. And if you go back then, during that period of time when there was extraordinary stigma, particularly against the gay community, and it was only when the world realized how the gay community responded to this outbreak with incredible courage and dignity and strength and activism, that I think that really changed some of the stigma against the gay community. Very much so, Fauci added. I see a similarity here because health disparities always existed for the African American community, he said. But here again, with the crisis, how it's shining a bright light on how unacceptable. The article further stated that Fauci, along with others, noted that there were no biological reasons African Americans were dying at higher rates from COVID-19. Fauci said it's not the case that African Americans were getting infected more often, but rather that the prevalence of underlying medical conditions, the diabetes, hypertension, obesity, and asthma, had led to higher intensive care admissions and death rates. The article ends with this. Fauci later told a reporter that the trend was not limited to particular cities or states. The underlying reason why that is happening does not change from state to state. The disproportionate impact should be a call for broader action once the dust settles, he said earlier. So when all of this is over, and as we said, it will end, we will get over coronavirus, but there will still be health disparities, he said, which we really do need to address in the African American community. So that's the end of what he said in the article and in his remarks at that particular press conference. And so it wasn't a simple answer for me. I couldn't just say, Black people don't get the best care, because it goes deeper than that. So I had to research to make sure that my facts were together. So this is going to be a series. I'm not sure how long the series, um, but probably at least for the next um, three sessions in taking care of us. So let me start here. Last year, for those of you who don't know, I researched and I am very much into family legacy and history. So I have been looking up information on my paternal grandfather, who was a pharmacist, like my father was. And I knew he graduated, or he attended Shaw University's Leonard Medical School. Um, And for those of you who are surprised to hear, Shaw University had a medical school in the early 1900s. Um, and I came about an article that taught why the medical school closed down. And I was kind of surprised when I read it. So in the early 1900s, there were 155 medical schools in the U.S., including Shaw University's Leonard Medical School. My grandfather attended the School of Pharmacy, as did many other time, including Dr. York Garrett of Durham, North Carolina. And for you longtime Raleigh residents, Dr. George Debnam also graduated from medical school at Leonard. And the article that I mentioned previously is called The Flexner Report. It was originally commissioned by Andrew Carnegie after he had established the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching, or CFAT. He wanted to provide financial security and well-being for college faculty and their families. And I have no idea, black or white or what. I don't have any information on that. I can guess, but I don't know that for sure. At that time, most of the medical schools in America were considered proprietary, and that means they operated as private, for-profit businesses. There were no regulations or guidelines for them. The schools offered specialized or practical instruction in medicine, law, and business. We have some proprietary universities and schools now, but they do not teach medicine, business, or law. And for Andrew Carnegie, medical giving or philanthropy was not the top on his list of causes. It was the third. I'm going to do a little bit more research on that as well. But his priorities in medical giving were aimed at the prevention of illness, not the cure, finding cures. He, quote, found the proprietary character of medical education distasteful, end quote. And that ideology helped to shape how he made his donations. So the Flexner Report was undertaken by Abraham Flexner, who was an educator, not a medical professional. And he requested the employment because he was had a connection with the gentleman in charge of the foundation that Carnegie founded, and that gentleman was the president of MIT at the time. And so his name was Pritchett, and Mr. Flexner went back a couple of times and requested the ability to undertake this research. So he visited 150 medical schools and wrote reports on each school. And because he was an educator, his mind was already set that education should be undertaken in a certain style. There should be continuity to it. There should be a pattern. There should be needed to be teaching the same thing. And so he ended his research with the notion that there should be specific rules and regulations set up for the entire of medicine, for admission, for what was taught at the schools, for who did the teaching. Because in a lot of cases, medical schools were started by medical professionals who they just set up a school to teach what they did. And so there were no guidelines in place. There was no you didn't have to necessarily graduate from high school to go to medical school. And of course, as a result of his report, there was a lot of controversy about whether this was the right thing to do or whether it was not. Some of the larger schools made efforts to merge with some smaller schools to bring them together so that they were all teaching the same kinds of things. And it was determined that, that maybe this was a good thing. So many of the schools also changed their practices. But a lot of schools were struggling because it is expensive to have a medical school. Your faculty has to be paid. You have to have all the bodies, the people. They were struggling. And a lot of schools at that time, especially the African American schools, were had been created out of the struggle that white people in the North had seen and would found the schools. So there was a constant fundraising process for the colleges all the time. And so the findings of the report undermined the educational system that was going on. Regardless of whether it was good or bad, it still undermined what was going on. And so a lot of schools were already struggling with fundraising, and under pressure from the report and larger schools in the areas, they closed. There were only 7 Black medical schools at the time. 5 of them closed. And most of the northern schools were still not Blacks, and none of the southern medical schools were admitting Blacks. So I'm going to switch over now and talk a little bit about Black medical school history, or African American medical school history in America. So before 1865, medical schools were closed to Blacks in the South and mostly in the North. So the first African American doctors received their medical degrees abroad. So they would have to travel somewhere else to get them. A few medical schools in the East admitted Blacks: Harvard, Yale, and Pennsylvania. And in the Midwest, Indiana, Northwestern, and Michigan accepted some African Americans. So the first African American medical student who graduated from a northern medical school was in 1847. His name was David Peck. He finished Rush Medical School in Chicago. 1849, Bowdoin Medical School in Maine awarded degrees to John DeGrasse and Tom. In 1858, the Berkshire Medical School in Massachusetts awarded 2 medical degrees to African American students. And in 1860, there were at least 9 northern medical schools that admitted Blacks: Bowdoin in Maine, Medical School of the University of New York, Castleton Medical School, Berkshire Medical School in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, Rush Medical School in Chicago, the Eclectic Medical School of Philadelphia, the Homeopathic College of Cleveland, the American Medical College, and the Medical School of Harvard University. After 1865, between 1868 and 1904, there were 7 medical schools established for African Americans. In 1895, I'm just giving you some history here. In 1895, there were 385 African American doctors, but only 7% of those had graduated from white medical schools. In 1905, there were 1,465 African American doctors, but only 14.5% of those had graduated from white medical schools. And then between 1890 to the end of World War I, there were about 2,400 physicians, African American, who were graduated from Howard. Those were the only tools that survived the report that were African American. So these are the schools that were established from 1868 to 1904. Howard University Medical School, which is in Washington, D.C., was established in 1868. Meharry Medical School was established in 1976, and that's in Nashville, Tennessee. Leonard Medical School at Shaw University was established in 1882 and closed in 1914, or began closing in 1914. They were completely closed in 1918. New Orleans University Medical College from 1887 to 1911 was renamed Flint Medical College, but the New Orleans University Medical College closed. The Knoxville College Medical Department was in Knoxville, Tennessee from 1895 to 1900. It became known as Knoxville Medical College in 1900 and closed in 1910. Chattanooga, Tennessee had Chattanooga National College, which was open from 1902 to 1908. The University of West Tennessee College of Surgeons was open from 1904 to 1923. That was in Memphis. But by 1923, Howard University and Meharry had medical schools that were African-American colleges that remained. So the hurdles that had to be overcome were new medicine, new types of research centers, modern equipment, diagnostic interventions, because part of the Flexner report said that you needed to have this kind of equipment to teach. Well, if you're already struggling to keep your doors open, period, and then you find that you have to have certain types of equipment and you can't afford to buy that, and that's what the recommendation is, because this report was used by the Medical Association to change medicine, to change how medicine was practiced, and also to weed out people. I'm sure there was a business rationale to this, because medicine was still for profit. And so, there are some doctors who may go and practice and don't want to make any money, but I don't know of any of them. And that obviously is no different than other. But when you look at, you had schools to 155, you already have a dearth of African Americans who were going to be able to become medical doctors, because there wasn't room to teach them in those schools. So by 1914, 4 of the 6 the schools had disappeared. Leonard Medical School was actually the largest school at the time. It closed. The school closed in 1915. There were still some degrees started through 1918 because classes had begun and they had already started teaching. So the schools that are now left are Howard and Meharry, because of the Flexner report. So in the process, there were medical societies that were set up. So the AMA, which is what we hear about all the time, the American Medical Association, was set up as a national medical in Philadelphia in May of 1847. It was exclusive to whites at the time it was set up. Black doctors who sought membership were repeatedly denied admission. And I want to say that, I'll talk about this more, but in 2008, the AMA publicly apologized for how they had made sure that African Americans were not able to join their medical society. The next medical society that we talk about is the Medical Society of the District of Columbia. It was organized in 1817, chartered in 1819, and always stayed closed to African Americans. The first Negro, or that's what it says on my paperwork, the first Negro Medical Society was the Medico-Chirurgical Society. It was founded in 1884 and chartered, took 10 years to charter it. In 1895, when it became apparent that discrimination in medicine would not end. The National Medical Association was established in 1895, and that is the nation's oldest and largest organization representing African American physicians and health professionals in the U.S. That association still exists today. This was the society that was founded when it was obvious that African Americans were not going to be allowed into a professional society that had by whites. And so they had to start their own society. The National Medical Society of the District of Columbia was established in 1870. It was predominantly African American, but a lot of Black physicians refused to join that society. The North Carolina Medical Society was predominantly white and is still around today. It was chartered in 1849, and in 1961, the society allowed Black physicians to become scientific members but not have social membership. So that means that they could join because they were physicians, but they could not participate in any of the social activities, coming to meetings or any of the other social activities. And so in 1887, the North Carolina Medical, Pharmaceutical, and Dental Association was chartered in 1887. It's North Carolina's African American Medical Society. The new name is the Old North State Medical Society, and that was changed in 1948. As I was growing up, my father, who was a pharmacist, was part of the Old North State Society. And I don't remember the name change being something that we used until I was, I guess, in high school. We still called it the Old North State Medical, Pharmaceutical, and Dental Association. And that was who met together. As I was growing up, the doctors, the pharmacists, and the dentists that were particularly in Wake County and across the state, as far as I know, met together as a group. It was after I got into high school in the 1970s that I saw that the medical professionals were meeting together and the dental and pharmaceutical group were not. So by 1956, the medical societies of every southern state had agreed to admit Blacks, with the exception of Louisiana and North Carolina. Keep going today. Delve a little bit further into the Flexner Report and what that meant in terms of health disparity. As you can see, just from what I've talked about today, there weren't enough African American doctors coming out. And particularly in the South, you might not be able to see a doctor. White doctors have to see Black patients. Some chose to, but most chose not to. So just as there were separate hospitals, I was born in, which was the Black hospital here in Raleigh. Wake Med did not start admitting Black patients until 1960. I'm not sure when Rex did, but there was discrimination across the board. And so that makes for difficulty in taking care of health issues, which is a great part of why there are underlying health disparities in the African American community. And we'll delve some more into that on Thursday at noon. I look forward to seeing you then. Come back and learn some more with us. So we'll see you at noon on Thursday. And I will be doing this from my personal page on Thursday and sharing it to Taking Care of Us. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have questions, either on my Facebook page or inside of Taking Care of Us, and I'll try to make sure that information is answered. Have a good day. Stay safe. See you later.